All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm your host, Dr. Nii. I'm joined by
Dr. Renee.
Oh, that was it?
That was it. That's all
right.
you're getting.
All right. Well, cool. I like it like that. Less than 2 seconds, straight to the point. Listen, less than 2 seconds is not good all the time. Just letting you know.
Okay.
Is your mic okay?
Yeah, it's about to fall over, but I think it's fine now.
Yeah, I think your mic is okay. You're good there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. Listen, this is another episode. This is going to be an episode where we are talking about, well, look, this show is about money, medicine, as well as pop culture. And I think over the last several weeks, pop culture has been like flashing like crazy in our lives. We don't live in a vacuum, and we've just kind of done our best to kind of swipe it and not really speak about it. And, I haven't brought it up as a topic of concern. We're talking about gun violence. We're talking about obviously what happened last week with Roe versus Wade.
Wade.
Roe versus Wade. My bad. Sorry about that, guys. And obviously some other issues that have been going out there. Most importantly, just as important as the other ones, is that stat article that we wanted to talk about. That stat article that came out about 2 weeks now, talking about how Black residents statistically are being dismissed from residency programs more so than their counterparts. So there's a lot to talk about. We haven't talked about it. Let's jump right into it. Hopefully people who are watching us on Instagram, listen, we appreciate you. We know it's late. If you got any questions, shout us out. We're watching right here. So if you have any questions, shoot us out, let us know, and we'll be sure to try to answer them and interact with y'all. Listen, everybody who listens to us on the podcast, I'm telling you right now, you are missing out on a dope experience on YouTube. You can follow us on YouTube. Everybody who's watching us on YouTube, slowly but surely, our subscriber count is increasing. Yeah. As you can see, we got an Adinkra symbol here. I got this all the way from Ghana when I was over at a mission trip, and it costs more to get this framed
than to
actually buy it.
Right.
I might as well have just paid the artist, the same amount. He could have done more of the money than giving it to Michaels that charged me a grip to get this frame. But either way, that's an improvement to our studio. Slowly but surely, we're improving. So listen, everybody who's listening, people who are following us on Instagram, you guys are getting a really great experience. If you're listening on podcasts, and we understand. But listen, think about watching us on YouTube.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
You ready to do this? I've stalled. I keep stalling.
Yeah. Jump into it. There's a lot to talk about.
All right. So listen. So for people who don't know, I grew up in Irvington, New Jersey, as well as Lefrak City. Never forgot where I came from. I know where you grew up, not too far from where I grew up. And although now that we are physicians, we are in a different socioeconomic status. For me, those roots are really hard to, get rid of. I've never forgotten where I came from. And to an extent, I vote like I still live in those communities.
Me too.
So my parents still live there. I have family that still lives in neighborhoods like that. And I think that oftentimes you'll see people who say they vote their interests, right? And their interests may be money related. And that's most people, they vote money related and so forth. But I vote knowing that the decisions that I make or the decisions that are made with my vote are going to affect more often my family that's not in the same socioeconomic status than me, which is the majority of my family.
Yeah.
So whenever I vote, I always vote with them in mind. And go from there. I don't know if you want to add anything like that.
No, I mean, I think, I feel the exact same way. I just have never forgotten, where I've come from. I vote the exact same way. I just remember, growing up in East New York, Brooklyn, that life isn't always easy, and there are people who still live in the community in which I was raised, and life continues not to be easy for them. Even a generation later or 2 generations later. And I think, I feel like we have to think about the most vulnerable populations and be able to think about, our responsibility as a society with regards to vulnerability. And when you take care of people who are most vulnerable, I think it says a lot, about your society, about the humanity of your society. So I always keep that in mind.
You can judge a society based off of how it treats people who have the least.
Right.
And, look, for me as a trauma surgeon, at least with Roe versus Wade, it doesn't come up much at all. I take care of pregnant patients, but these are patients mainly who are in their third trimesters or maybe in their second trimester. They get into a car accident. The ER doesn't want to clear them unless they get our blessing. So they make them a trauma alert. We evaluate them and then go from there. Mm-hmm. I think I only had one patient ever who was, I believe, in her second trimester. Mm-hmm. I think either her first or second trimester. She was in a bad car accident, and she was the heart was just like at whatever it was like at like 10 or 20. Mm-hmm. She was pregnant.
The fetal heart rate.
Yeah, the fetal heart rate was just horrible, and it was very interesting with the politics of the hospital. Mm-hmm. At that hospital, they could not do an abortion. Mm-hmm. So that patient, we had to ship them out 2 hours. Yeah. To go to another facility for them to get the, evaluation and then possibly the eventual abortion at that point. And that was related to trauma. Right. But that's as close as I've ever gotten to this situation. I know that you deal with this situation a little bit more than I do, way more than I do. And then definitely your opinions on this, way more than my opinion also. But let's start off. Last week, Supreme Court made a decision that basically undermined the decision that was made back in 1970 with Roe versus Wade. Mm-hmm. And in essence, there is no federal protection whatsoever for abortion in the country.
In the United States.
It's really up to the states to determine if they're going to protect that right. A lot of states have already started, as soon as that decision was made, a lot of states already had laws enacted, these trigger laws enacted that basically said, okay, well, past 6 weeks, that's it. Nobody can get an abortion. Mm-hmm. And other states are in the process of enacting that. And then other states like or California and New York, they're in the process of strengthening their protection of abortion. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. It's a smorgasbord of stuff. So I can talk about the Turnaway Study, which talks about a lot of different things, but why don't we just start off with your thoughts in general?
I think that overturning Roe versus Wade is going to have just way more impact than I think most people realize. I don't think most people understand what we do in my profession of OBGYN with regards to taking care of pregnant women in all the possible scenarios that potentially could be construed or misconstrued as just elective terminations or abortions. I think when people think about abortion, they oftentimes think of people, women who may have gotten pregnant and just, I don't want the pregnancy anymore, and therefore
I think people think about it, the teenager, right?
Right.
That teenager who's low income and made a reckless decision and is trying to do this to better their lives, quote unquote, and stuff like that.
Right. So. And that's their thought, right? Like, oh, you were being reckless, you were being irresponsible, and now you don't want to have this baby, and therefore, now you want to have an abortion, and we're not going to allow that. And that. First of all, there are so many different ways that I can even approach that particular point of view. But that's their thought process. But, abortion looks a lot differently, right? Or the ending of a pregnancy looks a lot differently than what most people understand. And it is a very complicated thing. And so when you don't understand all of the possible ways that a pregnancy can terminate, or all the possible reasons that a pregnancy can terminate, then you end up in a mess of trouble. And even people who support this overturn will find themselves in situations where they're going to be like, wait a minute, I didn't understand that this is what was going on. And so that to me is what is actually going to be very interesting, is that you're going to have supporters of this finding themselves in these situations,
Right.
and then wanting, a certain level of care that they actually never even voted for, that they actually voted against.
So let's talk about one of those situations. Can you think of one that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I could think of a whole bunch. First of all,
for the sake of that podcast, let's do one.
Absolutely. I mean, let's talk about ectopic pregnancies.
Okay.
Right? Ectopic pregnancies are common enough that you will find that many supporters of this overturn are going to find themselves in a situation where they're going to have ectopic pregnancies, and they are not going to be able to be treated in a timely fashion, or in an appropriate fashion. I don't know if people remember, but either last year or a couple of years ago, there was a lawmaker who basically said, yeah, if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy, then don't terminate the pregnancy, reimplant the pregnancy from the fallopian tube into the uterus. Where they doing that at?
Yeah, so clearly he doesn't understand.
But that's what I'm saying, right? So you have people who
That's the part that drives me nuts the most, is like there's like this interpretation, making legislation, and you don't even understand the science. Clearly, you don't understand the science.
You don't understand the human body, yet you are making laws that essentially dictate how you're supposed to care for the human body. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, is to reimplant an ectopic pregnancy. It literally doesn't make any sense. So we're going to find that patients are going to be either at death's door, or they're going to just die outright because, well, she couldn't get treated for her ectopic pregnancy because technically it's considered an abortion. We're going to find issues with IVF. You and I talk about IVF all the time because, we did IVF for 2.5 years, but you're going to find problems with IVF. So if you have leftover embryos, and, after you've completed, all of the cycles that you wanted in order to make your family, the question is, what happens to those embryos? You can't just destroy them anymore. So you actually have facilities, IVF facilities, who are now scrambling to move their embryos to different states so that those embryos are protected, for their patient's sake. And I'm just like,
I didn't even think about that, actually.
Oh yeah. There's so many implications. You have, septic abortions where, you have an intrauterine infection, the fetus is infected, the mother obviously is at risk for sepsis, and, the fetus is under a viable age, right? If they were to deliver. And it's like, okay, well, if you can't deliver this woman, and the baby is not going to survive anyway, what are we doing? Why are we keeping her pregnant? Because this is not a survivable diagnosis without treatment. And so, we're going to find ourselves in a mess of trouble on the healthcare side, because now you have doctors scrambling, trying to figure out what to do when they are in states that have these trigger laws. And you have people who are like, doctors who are like, well, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, you literally
you have to get your lawyer on the phone.
Yeah, you just legislated a medical decision that is primarily made by a woman and made with a woman and her doctor.
Right.
And you just put a law person in between there who doesn't understand anything about medicine. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, imagine a trauma coming in, and, someone basically, you have to get on the phone to be like, can I treat this patient in the way that I see fit? Like, imagine that. So, again, like I said, it'll be very interesting. These things don't happen in a bubble. And there are going to be a lot of people who are pro turnover of Roe v. Wade, who are going to find themselves in this situation. And so, I just think that it's going to make for very interesting patient interactions, and just, data is going to be falling out of the sky, because I can't see that this is going to improve any outcomes in the United States.
So it's funny that you mentioned bubble, because that's kind of how I was looking at this, right? Because some people may be like, well, Doc's outside the box. What are you doing talking about abortion? Like, this is not really a medical related show. When we do talk about, we are a fusion of money, medicine, and pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's going on in culture, we need to be talking about that, mainly because actually there are plenty of studies, particularly there's one study that they use in a lot of cases right now called the Turnaway Study that talks about, what the physical, mental, as well as financial consequences of denying a woman an abortion, what that really does to her, what that does to her family life, what that does to her future earning potential. So that's where, we want to weigh in, or at least I was doing the research and I was like, oh, I didn't even know about this. But this study came out recently. So it's called the Turnaway Study. And it was put out by the University of California, San Francisco. The lead researcher was Diana Foster. And for over a decade, this study group followed about a little bit under 1,000 women. And these women sought abortion over 21 states, right? They sought an abortion over 21 states. And the outcomes of denial of abortions compared to the physical as well as the mental and financial consequences, they were pitting those two together. So if you got denied an abortion, they did the long-term effects of what the physical, mental, as well as financial consequences are. So the premise findings, the big findings that they found out that I think we all knew as medical professionals, but I think it's really important for the lay public to understand is receiving an abortion does not harm the health and well-being of women.
Right.
Doesn't hurt them.
No.
Right. And then the second premise, which is just as big, is women denied access to an abortion creates economic hardship and insecurity, which lasts for years.
Yeah.
Which is where we step in.
Yeah.
So let's get into the economic hardships. So if turned away, these women were turned away and then they went on to give birth. They experienced an increase in household poverty lasting at least 4 years relative to those who received an abortion.
Yep.
They're more likely to not have enough money to cover basic living expenses like food, housing, and transportation. It lowered a woman's credit score. It increased the amount of debt. It increased the amount of bankruptcies and evictions. So this is huge.
Oh, yeah.
This is huge. So when a woman is looking for an abortion, it's usually not they just want to have an abortion.
Right.
There are some usually there's something economic behind it. There's some type of consequence financially that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we're specifically talking about abortion, but this also translates to, even things like birth control and sterilization. So, speaking of studies, years ago, there was a study called the CREST study. And apparently that study is one that is used very much, across our profession to kind of support the denial of sterilization of women who are requesting sterilization, especially under the age of 30, right? So if you are under 30 and you are requesting a sterilization procedure, it is not uncommon for an OBGYN to deny you because, well, you're under 30 and the CREST study, supports that. I think the CREST study stated, I think something like, don't quote me because I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it has something like, 20% of women under 30 had an increased risk of regret after they had the procedure. And so for me, I'm like, oh, then that sounds to me like 80% of them did not, right? So, but,
This study says 95% did not.
Right. So, yeah. Exactly.
95%
right? So
of the patients, 95% of the women did not have any regret.
So, we have to really think about what the implications are, because the implications for sterilization are very, it's very similar when you deny a woman sterilization and she goes on to have another pregnancy and then is denied an abortion. I mean, for me, it just baffles my mind why it is that we insist on making laws that control what people do with their bodies, But, this would not be the first time in this country that there are laws dictating that other people can do whatever they want to other people's bodies. So it's not surprising that this was overturned. So, I mean, I have a lot of opinions about this. The implications are just tragic.
Yeah. Let's move on to more of the hardships. So the relationship hardships. Now, if a woman is denied an abortion, this study showed that physical violence from the man who was involved in the pregnancy decreased for women who received abortions. Mm-hmm. So if the woman got an abortion, physical violence was reported less, but not for women who were denied abortions and gave birth. Mm-hmm. So if the woman was forced or was denied abortion and kept the child, that physical violence continued.
Right.
By 5 years, women who were denied abortions were more likely to be raising children alone, without family members or male partners, compared to women who received an abortion. Mm-hmm. So there's the physical violence aspect, and then there's the isolation aspect for people who are having children who, I guess at this point we say it's unwanted.
Yeah, or unwanted, unplanned pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. If we jump into the financial well-being of the child, or the financial well-being of the children who may already be alive during this point, right? So if the woman has more than one child, right, or a child or more, the children of the women, already have shown worse child development when their mother is denied an abortion, right? Yep. Children are more likely to live below federal poverty level. And there's poor maternal bonding that's also reported with that child that's born.
Yeah.
In terms of serious health problems, more life-threatening complications are reported: preeclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage.
Yeah.
And then you throw on top of that, there's a whole bunch of other studies that show that the access to abortion increased the likelihood of graduating college by 72%. I'm going to say that again. Access to abortion increased the likelihood of a woman graduating college by 72%. And the ability to delay motherhood by 1 year. 1 year due to access to legal abortion increased a woman's wage by 11% on average. Right? So once again, with Docs Outside the Box, we're talking about money, medicine, and pop culture. So we are merging.
This is literally like, right? This is literally the fusion that we talk about. Right. Yeah.
Now, you also throw on top of that, right? So we already said the likelihood of you graduating college, 72%, if you had access, right? Women who have access to that. And then the ability to delay motherhood by just 1 year increases the wages by 11%, which is huge, right? 40% of women don't, in the United States, 40% of women do not qualify for unpaid maternity leave under FMLA. I'll say that again. 40% of women do not qualify for unpaid maternity leave under FMLA. And then 88% of women don't have access to any type of paid leave. Then you throw on top of that, moms earn 75 cents for every dollar paid to fathers, pops. And then that number is exacerbated for women of color. Right. So for me, it's like, okay, you are just making this situation worse. And obviously in this situation, the key thing is not taking away abortion. It's fixing the public policies that protect children, the public policies that protect pregnant women, fixing the safety nets. So I'm going to put this study, I'm going to put also, there's something called the Safety and Quality of Abortion Care in the United States. It's not a study by me. It's a study by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And it talks about this study, or it talks about the care of abortion over the last almost 50 years. So
well,
you go check it out there.
You said something that, really perked me up. And that is, that they're making it worse. And the question is, worse for whom? Right? There is, for me, obviously, an ulterior motive for this, right? Like there is a rhyme and a reason for this. I'm not of the faction that agrees with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, so I can't, really say what that rhyme or reason is. But for that faction, they don't believe that they are making it worse. And actually, all of the things that you read here, I think actually is probably what they're looking for, right? So really, when we talk about worse, it's like, well, worse for whom? You know? So worse for, us, it seems to be worse for us because we believe that, women should not have to take these financial hits, should not have to take these, these social hits. So yeah, we believe that this is worse. But for other people reading this, they think this is fine.
Yeah.
If you have a pregnancy that's unplanned or unwanted, that's what you get. It's your punishment, right? For just having that pregnancy. But again, it's not that every single pregnancy that is to be terminated is unplanned or unwanted. That is not, the end all be all of it all. You actually have terminations of very wanted pregnancies, right? We talked a bit again about IVF. IVF has an increased risk of ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, you could just go on Twitter right now and you'll see so many doctors listing all the issues that occur, all the complications that occur while you're pregnant. Like,
exactly.
What happens if you develop, cancer?
Right.
Let's say you develop cancer in your first trimester.
Exactly.
What happens
What
then?
do you do?
Right.
Exactly.
What do you do then?
Right.
If, let's say, you need chemotherapy and you need radiation and then you need surgery, like,
right.
What happens then?
What happens then?
Do you forego treatment? Or do you put yourself more at risk and maybe even a baby at risk? Like, what happens then? Like,
right. And because my thing is this, if you are doing, let's take the IVF again. If you are doing IVF, you obviously are not just planning this pregnancy, you paying for it. You absolutely want this pregnancy. Yeah. Now you get an ectopic. So what do you want what do you want that woman to do? You want her to keep this pregnancy? And suffer all of these potential consequences? Like, it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. And so these are the things that we see in my profession that, really is just kind of like, at this point, many of us are just kind of throwing up our hands in the air, like, okay, well, I don't even know what to do with at this point. And many OBGYNs are really thinking about fleeing those states that have these laws that really are not going to protect women. The problem with that, though, is that many of the OBGYNs who are of the faction of, being pro the overturn of Roe v. Wade, they don't even refer patients out, right? It's not even like, well, I don't do abortion, but let me send you to somebody who does. Many of them don't even want to participate whatsoever in that decision. And so they will say, no, I'm not even going to refer you to anyone I know who would be able to care for you in the way that you desire. This is a problem, right? So now you have a dearth of care, and while OBGYNs might be able to get up and leave,
patients can't.
Right. Whole communities cannot get up and leave. Like, this is not going to be,
There's already a physician shortage in a lot of the Midwestern states.
Exactly.
The southern states that these things are enacted.
Exactly.
It's possible that this may make it worse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so I think that there are unintended consequences that are going to be seen as well. Consequences that, for entire communities that, all of a sudden things are going to, ideals may shift a little bit, just kind of based on, I didn't see this coming. I didn't know that this was going to fall at our doorsteps. And all of a sudden, there may be some shifts in ideals, but that remains to be seen.
So listen, everyone, interested in what you got to say about this, you can text us at 1-833-230-2860. Once again, you can text us at 833-230-2860. Alfred, hook it up on the bottom. Once again, that's 833-230-2860. I don't think you can beat this. This stuff is literally changing by the minute, right? Every day something new is changing. But we thought that we should bring in the aspect of where we grew up, what our socioeconomic experience was, where we are right now, and kind of what we think about this situation and what the economic implications are. Right. Because I think that there are people who are in medical school who have to deal with this. Yeah. Right. There are people who are in other professional schooling who have to deal with possibly needing to get an abortion, or they may be in residency, or they may be in attending themselves, or whatever it may be, and they have to make a decision like this. So this is something that doesn't just affect people of a certain socioeconomic class that you can't touch, you can't feel, and to many aspects you can't see. It may affect you also, and I appreciate you, Renee, for sharing that aspect. And there's certain things that I can't speak to. Right. That you can definitely speak to, and definitely as a provider, you can speak to that, and as a woman, you can speak to that also. So, shall we move on?
It will be difficult, but yes.
Well, the next one is just as tough.
I know. That's what I was thinking about. Like, it'll be tough to move on because I know what's coming up next.
Right. So, which is gun violence. So, we're going to keep this one short. So, I think gun violence is pretty straightforward. We already know what's going on. For the first time ever, children, teenage children are the number one cause of death is gun violence, which is crazy. Yeah. So I'm just gonna keep it.
It used to be accidents in the home.
Yeah. So it's nuts. We saw what happened in Uvalde. They're still trying to work that out. It's just right now we're at a point where these assault weapons are able to take out so many people. From my experience, growing up, once again, like my experience with guns, my experience with weapons like this. I have a very, what's the word I can say?
Tenuous.
Yeah, like I stay away. And I know that during my training in the Midwest as well as in the South, people have different thought processes with guns. They have a different relationship on guns. I respect that. As a matter of fact, some attendings have taken me out when I was in Georgia, and I've held an AR-15. Right? I've held an AR-15 and I shot it, and it's very exhilarating. Not in for me, it wasn't in a good way, but I can see how exhilarating it could be to be able to like pop off shots just that quickly. I just didn't have I didn't find it very positive. Right. And I think for me, it's almost like you see what this weapon can do, and you see it just, I don't know, I just didn't feel, it wasn't the most positive experience. I'll leave it to you like that. Yeah. And I think as someone who's a trauma surgeon who deals with people who get shot, I think one of the worst experiences I saw was like a teenage kid who was shot, going to a teenage club. I didn't even know that existed. But
teenage clubs.
Yeah, they was shot. He was shot leaving a teenage club, and if you see the destruction of what it did to like a face, it's just those are the type of things that never leave you. And like the father coming in and seeing their child, and it's just like, wow, like that never leaves you. Yeah. So for me, guns, I don't really have a very positive experience on it. I don't use that to I don't make any judgments on other people who have a positive experience with guns to an extent, right? It's the assault weapons that I'm just like, all right, we gotta get a clamp on this, right? Yeah. And so I was listening to Dr. Nii and Renée on Vox. So she did a really good podcast with them where they talked about a gun policy game changer. I'm going to put that link in the show notes. Basically, it talks about how now there is some funding for some studies that are going on that are actually going to study the effects of gun violence. It's not making a decision as if guns are bad or not. It's just talking about if there's a gun here, this is the impact. If this happens, then that's all it does. And then from there, people can make decisions based off of that. So I'm also going to list an article in there that says guns do more than kill. So it's more than just, I think we talked about this about 3 or 4 years ago. I had Dr. Lori Punch as well as Dr. Brian Williams who came on the show. And they were talking about how, gun violence is more than just what happens to the person who's shot. It's the family that gets affected. Right. It's actually the entire community that gets affected. Obviously, the support system that gets affected. Right. So this article by Vox.
Even the medical profession gets affected.
Absolutely. So this I put in here, guns do more than kill. You guys can catch that in the show notes. Let's jump into speaking up while in residency. Let's talk about that. Again, because I think we can actually have a good talk about this. Yeah. Speaking up in residency, my thoughts are, is it worth it to speak up when there is so much to lose? Thoughts?
Ooh, you know,
You've been through 4 years of medical school. You possibly may be the first person going to medical school. By the time you get to residency, you probably have over $200,000 in student loan debt. And, I'm just leaving that as the backdrop. So I just want to see what you guys say.
No, for me, I don't think it's a cut and dry decision. I think it's something that you really have to weigh. You have to weigh your future versus what it is you're speaking up about. I know in the case of this particular resident, it was, she was speaking up about an assault, pretty much almost a physical sexual assault of a patient who was in the operating room. And she alleged that her attending essentially assaulted the patient.
Yeah.
And so
it's been all over Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, like that's a really tough thing because now.
How do you prove that?
Right. How do you prove it? Number one. Number two, what is the blowback on you? Right. When you're really supposed to be protected by whistleblower, whistleblower policies and things like that, and so the question becomes, well, maybe you're not protected. Maybe you are protected by whistleblower policy, but maybe they'll find another way to get at you. Maybe you weren't that great of a resident to begin with, even though you got all the accolades, even though you got, all of the awards and the scholarships and the everything else. But all of a sudden,
or you just, never got in trouble. You just was a regular run-of-the-mill average resident, which I think the majority of people are, right? And like, I'm an average resident. I'm trying to make it through. So, but why am I standing out?
Right. And so I think that's a tough thing. Now, I know you talked about in the beginning that Black residents tend to be dismissed from their residencies.
Oh, you jumping into that already? Okay, yeah. So there was an article that came out 2 weeks ago by Stat. Stat put out this article called "Black Doctors Forced Out of Training Programs at Far Higher Rates Than White Residents." I think
it was by Usha Lee McFarley. I think is her name.
So basically, it just laid it out. It was like, well, Black residents are only 5% of residents in the entire country, but make up 20% of dismissals.
Yeah.
And this was actually in an article that number came from the ACGME. So it's not even the writer. Right. Like, this was put out by the ACGME, so it's like, okay.
Yeah, and nobody sees a problem with this. Right. But I'm gonna.
And this number came out in 2015.
I'm gonna take it a step further and be like, so those are the people who actually made it to residency.
Yeah.
Let's take it a step back, right? Because you see the same trend in medical school. Disproportionately, Black medical students are dismissed from medical school, even though they make up such a small percentage of the medical student body.
Right.
And so now you have, only 5% of residents, that they make up only 5% of residents. I'm like, what about the ones that didn't even make it to that 5%?
Yeah, I was really interested in the story that they told. So if you didn't read this article, they told a story of a resident who was in ENT, and she was at the top of her class. This resident was phenomenal in medical school, and then she got into residency, and then it was just what appeared to be a stumble after stumble after stumble after stumble, and then eventually she was kind of like, quote unquote, kind of forced out. Right. But if you look at her, when they talk about her reviews or when they talk about people like anonymous sources and so forth, basically they were just like, she didn't stand out any more than anybody else. So it's like, well, why was she targeted and so forth?
Right.
She developed, some issues. So here's the thing too, also is, we talk about the consequences that occur financially, but she kind of was very open about the mental health issues that occurred also with having to shift to a different program.
Yeah.
Or just going through this program because you feel like almost like you're being gaslit.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what am I doing? Like,
right.
How about this? I'll wake up earlier.
I'll do all the things.
I'll do all the things that I need to do. I'll make myself a martyr to make sure that I get here on time. Not only am I here on time, I'm gonna be here earlier than anybody else. I'm gonna see more patients than anybody. I'm gonna leave later. I'm not gonna take vacation.
I'm gonna work twice as hard to get half as much.
And you just end up, the story or this article kept kind of highlighting the same thing over and over again. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, like I kind of remember hearing people talk about this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I went to a HBCU residency program. I was at Morehouse.
Right.
So to be honest with you, I didn't experience this. I did experience a little bit of, I got to get there earlier. I got to work harder, mainly because I thought, from an osteopathic standpoint, there was that issue. I was the first osteopathic medicine medical student accepted into the program. So I was like, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do all these different things. And just that right there was
enough pressure.
A lot of pressure that nobody else was putting on me. I put that pressure on myself. Yeah. But you feel like, okay, I don't want to let anybody down. But imagine if there was someone who was like knocking at your door like, hey, you made this mistake.
Yep.
You made this mistake. Because she was saying, they said like her first year or her first 2 years when there was one program director there, nobody bothered her. Mm-hmm. As soon as another program director came here, it's like, well, you don't close your charts fast enough. Mm-hmm. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And you're just like, God damn, like, what am I can't get ahead here.
Right. And then when you look at what your counterparts are doing, you're probably not doing anything differently than what they're doing, And, it just, so my first year of residency, I've talked about this on the show before, but my first year of residency, I felt very, very similarly, like, to the point where I actually quit. Now, I will tell you, I was the third resident in my class to quit. I was the only one of those three that actually ended up staying. The other two residents who actually were not even minority. Well, technically one was. She was Puerto Rican. The other one was not a minority. But those two actually left. And just goes to show you that there's enough malignancy to go around in a residency program to begin with, right? There's enough malignancy to go around.
Laughing, but it's the truth.
But it's true, right? There's enough malignancy to go around in a residency program to begin with. But when you have, people who are being gaslit, and you try to figure out.
So let's talk about some of those examples. Why? So what kind of things were you going through? Because not everybody heard that previous episode. So what kind of things were you going through?
So, well, I will tell you one thing in particular was an attending who literally was on my back for I don't know what reason. He would come in to our sign out. He would berate me literally for no apparent reason. Quick story. One time I'm literally signing out. Or actually, I'm signing back in. I'm on the day team. I'm signing back in after I signed out the day before. I had told the night team, you need to check the PTT on this patient that we started heparin on. The night team signs back out to me. They never check the PTT. And the patient has heparin dripping, through her veins. So I'm like, we didn't check the PTT? Nope. I'm like, all right. So this attending comes in. And mind you, he's an MFM attending, and this patient that we're talking about is not even on his service, but he comes in and he hears like half of the story. And then from the half of the story that he hears, he assumes I didn't check the PTT. And I'm like, so he literally just comes in and starts berating me. Oh, you this, you that, you so irresponsible. You never check anything. You're not smart. Honestly, inside, I was literally stabbing him.
Yeah.
Like inside my head, I was literally stabbing him because I was like, this man has enraged me to no end. But being the professional that I am, I just sat there and looked at him like, if you only knew how stupid you look in front of everybody here because you don't know what you're talking about. So I let him go and I let him look stupid. And then I called my chief of GYN and basically told her to have him stay away from me for the next 24 hours. Otherwise, she was going to fire me that day. And those are the exact words I used. Mm-hmm. I said, you're going to fire me today because if he comes to me one more time, I can't guarantee what I'm going to do to him. So, things like that. Like, why? What's the reason? And so, when you say, well, should you speak up?
Right.
It's very hard because sometimes you have a target on your back and you have no clue.
Well, a lot of
why.
people don't have like that hotline that you had.
Right. Thankfully.
Right. Like that's one thing.
Thankfully, I did.
Yeah, you had that hotline that you can get through. And, we're qualifying everything. Like I said, I went to a HBCU.
Right.
You went to
I
a
did
program.
not.
You didn't go to one, so you had a different experience. And then the other thing, which is different from this article is like, well, it's actually kind of similar. It's like, well, how do you know when they're coming at you is because you're black? You don't know.
Right.
You have no clue. So then you start doubting yourself and you start doing all of these different mental calculations. I'm getting here early. I'm doing this. And it's just like, it's just not going to work out. Right. Because I have a hard time believing that only 5% of the residents are that bad that they make up 20% of the dismissals. Wait, so this is an issue because we talked about this before. It's like, well, is this really a resident problem, or is this like a system problem?
This is a systemic problem. So,
right? Like no, but I mean, like, is it like a resident? Like, what kind of students are you, or what kind of residents are you choosing? Right?
Exactly.
Right? Is this an admission problem, or is this like what are we talking about? Do you have the support system? Let's talk about that.
So let me just tell you guys a little bit of history in the 1940s. Okay, in the 1940s. So think about the makeup of medicine and medical schools in the 1940s. Okay, and who was going to medical school at that time. So in the 1940s, about 50% of medical students were dismissed from medical school.
How many?
50%. They had a 50% attrition rate, okay, of people who did not complete, okay, who were literally dismissed from school. Now, I want you to think about the demographics of the 1940s classes all across America, okay, in medical schools all across America, okay? Let's start there. So they figured out that we don't have a problem, with our educational system. We have a problem with our admissions system, right? We have a problem with admissions. And so they went through painstakingly, like very rigorous ways to be able to, figure out who should get into medical school. And what they did originally was that they had the first year medical students take a test. They had them take a test. But then they figured out, wait, if we give them the test before they get into medical school, that actually might tell us who would be better candidates for our medical school class. And the MCAT was born. Okay? And so my question at this point is something wrong with the students that you are accepting? Or is something wrong with your process? Right? Because again, like you said, you can't tell me 5% of residents are black, but 20% of them, okay.
I'm not believing it.
Right.
I'm not believing it. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not believing it.
So something is wrong with your process.
Especially when they come as tight as this one.
Yeah.
Like she was at the top of her class.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, something's wrong with your process. There is something that you are doing wrong. Something that you are doing wrong. But at this point, right, medical institutions are not saying, hey, why don't we look at our processes and figure out what it is that we're doing, right? Because we have gone through all the lengths to make sure that our admissions process is tight. Now, what about the process of getting people through their residency programs, through medical school? Maybe that's the problem now.
And I think...
Yeah.
I think the thing that I really focus on is like when they leave, like thank goodness this woman is able to find another program. Obviously, she's not going to be going into ENT, but I just think about like, how you going to pay off that student loan debt now? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like what happens with the salary that you're missing out on?
Yeah.
Right? Like she had a child and I think her husband was family medicine.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for that. But, there are folks who are on their own who are trying to figure this out. And whether it's, you're being targeted because you spoke up or, let's be honest, there's some residents who just need to step up. They ain't shit. Like they need to step up, right? Let's be honest about that. But 5%, 5% of residents coming up to 20% of the dismissal. I'm not buying that. There's something I agree with you that it sounds to be a process issue, or a support issue that's going on.
Right.
So for me, like with my standardized tests, my first year, I struggled with that mainly because I didn't have a system. But like Morehouse gave me like the resources,
support,
and then the next year, just like that,
it clicked,
and I went into the 80th percentile on my AppSite score because this is how you study for a test. Here's how you do the questions. Like I literally my first year got a textbook and was just thumbing through the pages, right? And, nobody knew that that's what the residents were doing until someone was like, yeah, that's what we're doing. They're like, wait, no. We got to get you guys some review books. We got to do, weekly reviews. We got to go through all of these different things where we're making you practice and prepare for the test.
Right.
And all of our scores went up. And it came to a point where, you remember Dr. McCoy? Dr. McCoy called University of Miami and was like, hey, he's going to be taking this test. And I don't know what happened, but all I know is I passed my test. I passed my test. This is the
when you were in fellowship.
Yeah, this is this is not a test in fellowship, but this is a test that I took while I was in fellowship.
Gotcha.
It's the test for the American Board of Surgery, right? The General Surgery Certifying Examination.
Right.
That's the first part. I passed that the first time. The big concern that the program Morehouse had was, well, we want to make sure that you pass it the first time. We do not want you to take this multiple times.
Yeah.
And I passed it. But I got to give them props because throughout the entire 5 years, they gave me resources, they gave me space, they gave me encouragement, to say, hey, we believe in you. We think that you're going to do this. Here's the resources. Now go ahead and go get them.
Yeah. But
so,
you know what? I
don't know if everybody has that.
No, I don't think that everybody does. And definitely I didn't have that level of support in my residency program. But I will tell you that I can't understand residency programs that don't have a problem with the fact that you are dismissing people at this level of education.
Yeah, that
like
part.
It really says something like, wait, so what are y'all doing? Like you as an entire program can't identify people because that's their excuse, right? Well, this person is not up to par. It's like, oh, so you as an entire program of very smart people can't identify people who should be strong enough to go through this program. Like, y'all can't figure this out. Like, for me, I'm like, it's an insult to yourself as a program to even have some level of attrition, because I'm sorry, you've been established for how long? You have plenty of smart people who are sitting around the room, and those smart people can't put their heads together to figure out this person isn't a good resident. No, that for me says something more about the program than it does about the resident.
This article went viral because there was a lot of people who are not physicians who I'm in group chats with who sent me this article. Your mom got this article.
Yep.
And they were just like, yo, what's the deal? Like, we didn't know this was going on.
Yeah. I mean, but this isn't just medicine.
Right. I mean, and when we saw the article, we were like, yeah. It just so happens that there's an article out on this, but this is something that we've heard through multiple stories while we were residents. And obviously once we became attendings and we're hearing about residents who are behind us who are going through these issues.
Exactly.
They got to change programs, or they got to, go to a different state, or, they got to repeat here. And you're just like, why is this happening? Like, this person was cold on X, Y, and Z. What's going on and stuff? And it's almost like this article kind of shed light on something that has been like a well-known secret, but has been kind of just put in the dark for such a long time. And I'm glad this article came out. I hope there's going to be more attention paid to this. That's my thoughts on that. So any final thoughts on this whatsoever?
There's just so much going on right now. And I know, on the show, we haven't really addressed it. If anybody knows anything about us, we have very strong opinions on a lot of different things.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we want to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that
but
we
have to be responsible of how we say it and stuff.
Well, we have to be responsible with how we say it, but we also, we also know that there are other reasons that people tune into the show. And so we want to stay true to that as well. So it's hard to just juggle all of that information But I'm glad that we were able to sit down and, provide at least our viewpoints. Our audience may or may
but
not
I think we
agree
got to
with
be
us.
real. I think we have to be real with this and let people know that we don't live in a vacuum. That's why I started it off like this, right? Like we can't just have a show about personal finance and not talk about issues,
things that are going on that will affect personal
finance, right? And as doctors, there is a certain level of understanding about abortion that we understand that a lot of people may not know. There's a certain level of even the economic hardship that we know that a lot of people may not know. So it's really incumbent on us to not just have a show. Like that's what we grew up with in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. People just like they would have, whether it's a TV show or they be on TV or they have a radio show, whatever it may be. And just like, y'all just not going to talk about X, Y, and Z.
No, they wouldn't talk about it.
Like, and I just always in my mind always thought like, I didn't want to be that person who, the world could be falling outside, but we're still talking about. So listen, man, you're student loan.
Your emergency fund.
Talk about your emergency fund and your student loan. They're like, man, damn that, man.
The world is on fire.
So this was there's gonna be more of this anyway. There's gonna be more of this that we would like to infuse what we think about this stuff because we appreciate everybody listening to the show. We appreciate everybody valuing our opinions, but our opinions are born through a certain experience we grew up in a certain way. And that is part of how we decide to come out with Docs Outside the Box. Like this is the reason why we present it this way, is because of how we grew up. So outside of that, man, listen, we appreciate everybody who's listening to this show. Whether you agree with us or disagree with us, let us know. Text us at 1-833-230-2860 or, the multiple ways that you can reach out on us. We just prefer if you send us a text. Also, don't forget to fill out the Docs Outside the Box survey with InCrowd. Make sure you click on that. It's in the show notes. And that way you can also let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. It really helps us to understand how we're bringing content to you, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And we go from there. We will catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you again for watching us on YouTube.
Yay. And Instagram.
Thanks,
everybody.
We are getting our visual, up and up. We working on that. And then everybody who listens to us on the podcast, listen, we appreciate y'all. And we're going to catch you all on the next one. All right.
Peace.
Peace.